much going on in the world, right? I mean, Iran, where do you start? You got the Iranian problems, you got Venezuela, you got Syria, um, and I'm spending time on each of those. But I think I've taken my eye off the ball on what's going on in Ukraine. So I want to talk today a little bit about what's happening in Ukraine and just share with you um, where things stand at the 16th of January in major areas in Ukraine, such areas as these. Let me dive right in here. Zaporizhia, Pokrovsk. We're going to talk about Pokrovsk a bit. There's like a 15 to 1 kill issue there. Um, in other words, 15 Russians to every one Ukrainian casualty. We're also going to talk about the Kramatorsk area. So let's go and let's dive into each one of these areas. I'm going to talk in this area down here too. Um, and so let's dive right into that. Let's go over to here. Okay, so this is the Zaporizhia area. And as we see here, Russia says that they claimed 15, on June the 15th, that the Russian forces seized Pavlika. And then this is really interesting. We see land coming back from the flooding downriver where the floods are going to kind of going away. This yellow area is Russian claimed Russian control of Ukraine territory or counterattacks. This is counterattacks by Russia. I mean by Ukraine. So that's one area. That is the not the big area I want to focus on. I'm going to focus on the Pokrovsk area. This is the Novik area, and if you can see, the key takeaway here is that Russian sources acknowledged on January 15th that Ukrainian forces maintain control over the western Malatomanek over here. That's key for Russia because they wanted to encircle Novolinka. Russian sources acknowledged on January 15th that Ukrainian forces maintain control over it. So Ukrainian forces are controlling these major areas, or pushing them back or keeping them back. They're not doing a frontal assault. That's what the Russians are doing, and that's why Russia's getting so ingrained um, or hurt in this way. Um, this is the southern. This is the Pokrovsk area, and this is where I really want to talk about today. As you see here, Ukrainian forces are counterattacking up here near Klodovach. Russia says that this is a meat grinder. This is the meat grinder. This taken Pokrovsk was the summer offensive of 2025 for Putin. This is as of the 16th, and they have some control, but as you see, they're having to counterattack, pushing Ukraine back. Ukraine says a little bit here. So they are mopping up. Let me bring in a video about Pokrovsk. Let me find it here. That's not the one. This is the one. Okay, let me bring that over here and we can take a look at this video. All right, let's just watch it for a minute. We're going to talk about Pokrovsk, that area where that is the major offensive for Russia as I see it on the 16th of January. This was actually from the 15th, and let's play it forward.
Russia made the grand announcement that it had been waiting to make after close to 2 years of fighting. Pokrovsk had finally fallen. That announcement came just ahead of a meeting that Vladimir Putin's and US President Donald Trump's envoys were about to hold in Moscow. It was all a little too convenient. While the Kremlin claimed victory to influence diplomatic envoys, Pokrovsk remains a kill box. Entrenched Ukrainian defenders, leveraging 3D urban terrain, are currently maintaining an unprecedented 15 to 1 infantry casualty ratio.
That's just crazy. Now, how do you sustain that? If you read more in the Institute Study of War, last week or 2 weeks ago, Vladimir Putin went from kind of a change of stance of recruiting instead of recruiting with dollars, which is what they've been doing. Really, what they're doing is pulling up their what is our equivalent of ready reserve on rolling numbers. So this is a new tactic. They have a huge ready reserve. These are people that are trained by the military and part of the Ministry of Defense. They're not the Zappas. The Zappas are your, um, what do we call it here? Standby reserve, like not ready reserve. Okay. The Zappas are men, males, up to the age of 70 years old. But this order 2 weeks ago doesn't include them. It includes the people that are part of the ready reserve in reserve units, and they're going to start doing rolling, which they haven't been doing. They've been keeping the reserve. They've been bringing people in through the meat grinder by offering them money. And these ready reservists are trained, better trained than some of these conscripts. But the, how can you sustain this? Let's play it forward a minute because I think they're going to get into the numbers, if I recall.
Against Russian assault groups. The Pokrovsk front line is collapsing. Putin's claims have been exposed for the bald-faced lies that they always were. Not bad for a city that has supposedly fallen to Russia. The revelation of the Russia versus Ukraine casualty rate comes from a video of a conversation between Jason J. Smart and Chuck Farrar, which was published on the Kyiv Post's YouTube channel. The description of that video says that Russia now has confirmed losses of 15 soldiers to every 1 Ukrainian soldier. In the video, Farrar outlines the situation as it stands for Russia, saying, well, despite claiming almost every day that they have taken Pokrovsk, and despite the fact that the Russians outnumber the Ukrainians in the sector, somewhere between 10 and 15 to 1, Pokrovsk has still not come under control of the Russians. Farrar has a point about the scale of the challenge that Ukraine has faced up to since Putin decided to ramp up the Pokrovsk assault during the summer of 2025. The capture of the city was one of Putin's main goals for his summer offensive. Of course, we now know that this capture didn't happen, and it still hasn't. But Russia keeps on pushing.
Although he claimed that in December that they did take it. As you saw on the map, there are areas contested where Russia has to assault back to take back that territory. And Ukraine is holding them there, which is huge.
By November, United 24 Media was reporting that Russia had sent almost 170,000 soldiers to capture Pokrovsk. That's more than the entire armies of many European nations, the outlet.
Isn't that crazy? They had sent 170,000, now it's a 10 to 1. If you know anything about tactics, right? Defense is 3 to 1. In other words, if they have 3,000 and you have 1,000, they should be that's you have to have a 3 to 1 ratio to defend. Okay? If you have a 10 to 1 ratio, they should be rolling right over them, but they're not. And that's huge because that means that they can have 170,000 troops pushing into Pokrovsk, and Ukraine only needs 17,000 troops to defend that, which is amazing, right? So Russia isn't doing really great here.
Points out. What's more, it gives us an indicator of how many soldiers Ukraine has defending Pokrovsk. If Farrar's assessment is accurate, there will likely be between 17,000 and 11,333 Ukrainian soldiers in Pokrovsk, which places a much bigger spotlight on Russia's abject failure to take the city. Yes, Pokrovsk is a fortress, but with such a massive numerical advantage, Russia should have toppled it by now.
Exactly.
It's not just soldiers that Russia is deploying in Pokrovsk either. Farrar notes that Russia is pummeling what's left of the city using massive airstrikes and, when it's able, artillery barrages. 170,000 soldiers doesn't seem to be enough for Russia, but then neither does the damage being caused by these strikes, which should be wiping out the Ukrainian defenders. Instead, the opposite seems to be happening. But these are all coming to naught, Farrar says of Russia's air and artillery strikes. Of Russia's daily burn, which is somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 casualties, about 30 to 40% of those casualties occur right in the Pokrovsk area.
This is why I'm saying this is their major offensive. there's 1,000 to 2,000 Russians. Now I don't know if this is killed in action or killed and wounded in action, but depleted, right? Taken out of the force. Um, so of that, let's take the top number, 2,000. 40% of that would be, 800. 800 of those troops, casualties of the 2,000 daily, are in that one little area, that one little city, compared to the whole front, right? So that's huge. But how do you sustain that? 2,000 men a day. That's 60,000 a month. There's reports that upwards of 20 to 25,000 Russians are being killed daily. Um, and then, so that would leave another, if it's 60,000, that would leave another 30,000 or so, 20 to 30,000 injured and taken out of the fight. So no longer in the fight. I don't know how Russia can sustain this through 2026. I watched another video about projections for 2026. I'm going to do a future video on that. Um, and I don't see how they can sustain this kind of fight. Um, but we'll see.
Of operations. In other words, Russia is a long way away from the success that it has claimed in the Pokrovsk direction. It's absorbing massive casualties in return for very little, if any, progress. How massive those casualties are is a source of debate. On December 22nd, the New Voice of Ukraine reported on comments made by the commander of Ukraine's 7th Rapid Response Corps of the Air Assault Forces, Yevhen Lasachuk. He delivered some figures that are a little different from the ones we've shared so far. Lasachuk estimates that Russia has committed 150,000 soldiers to Pokrovsk rather than 170,000. Russia's forces had also lost 6,500 soldiers in the Pokrovsk direction between September 1st, 2025 and December, though Lasachuk was quick to point out that these were only confirmed figures, suggesting that the real casualty total could be much higher.
Yeah, because Russians, they leave their troops on the ground. If they don't get them, they don't count them. So how can you go by anything a Russian assault force commander says?
The thing that Lasachuk said at Pokrovsk is that Ukraine was succeeding in turning it into a death trap for Russia's forces. In Pokrovsk, the enemy is bogged down in urban fighting, Lasachuk said before adding, the railway line effectively divides the city into northern and southern sections. The enemy is trying to infiltrate the northern neighborhoods in small groups, but we are consistently detecting and stopping these attempts.
Yeah, so the railway, that's a natural barrier, right? That open area, you got to cross that. And if you have a good line of defense on the northern side of that, you can effectively um, use that railway almost like a trench line.
On the more optimistic side of the casualty scale, and perhaps more in keeping with Barrar's comments, are casualty figures reported by Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky. In November, United 24 media reported on comments Zelensky made, in which he claimed that Ukraine had confirmed the deaths of about 25,000 Russian soldiers via drones. Most of
25,000 Russian soldiers killed by drones. That's a crazy figure.
those losses reportedly occurred in the Pokrovsk direction, with the word most implying at least 12,501 losses for Russia in October alone, far higher than Lasachuk's estimate for the entire period between September and the beginning of December. Regardless of who is right or whether the real numbers lie somewhere in the middle, the takeaway is that Pokrovsk has become a brutal campaign for Russia, one that is causing enormous amounts of deaths and is leading Russia to grow increasingly desperate. A sign of that desperation is seen in a January 11th article written by Forbes contributor Vikram Mittal. According to Mittal, Russia has reverted to using the tanks that have previously been unsuccessful in the assaults on Pokrovsk, albeit with a slight twist. Russia's new tactic involves pairing up two tanks with drone support. One of those tanks stands.
So Russia's trying new tactics, but so is Ukraine. I read a report the other day. Australia has provided 45 M1 Abrams tanks to Ukraine that's being brought into this fight at Pokrovsk. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens down the road as we follow this through various channels in the National Institute for War and some of the intelligence reports coming out of Russia daily. But I wanted to come back to Russia because I've been talking about Iran, I've been talking about Venezuela in my past videos, and we're kind of taking our, you see in the mainstream media here in America all the time, the our we're taking our eyes off what's going on in Ukraine and Russia with all this other kinetic activity that's happening around the world. What do you think? You think Russia can sustain this kind of carnage through 2026? Can they push Ukraine to the brink of having to give up territory? Is 2026 going to be the year that this war comes to an end? Another thing I heard, and this is crazy, right? Next month is 4 years of this war. That is a longer period of time that Russia is in a war since than World War II. The so this is historic. What's happening right now? Thank you for watching. If you like this, come back, like, and subscribe, and